The Deuce, David Simon, series finale last night on HBO. David Simon, obviously the creator of The Deuce, as well as The Wire, Show Me a Hero, Generation Kill, among others. Um, Dave, why don't we give our overall thoughts on season three and then the show as a whole? Because I think that this is one of the shows we've been with start to finish that we've been able to kind of talk about, and I think it's interesting to see the three different variations of the show and how
Yeah.
Simon kind of tied them all together at the end. I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think that was made abundantly clear as this season started to wrap up. Actually, how it started is that the Deuce, apparently from the beginning, was a 3-season arc with 3 distinct stories. I mean, broadly, we go from prostitution to porn to the AIDS crisis, the modernization of New York City, right? Just seeing how Times Square changed. Again, this is all rooted in real life. How Times Square changed over. I mean, what's the show's past? About 15 years of time. We're in like 85 by the end
Something
of
like
this.
that, yeah.
Start in the 70s. Seeing that change and seeing how all these different characters with their various storylines that are all serving the greater Simon theme about urban decay and crime and vice and how that affects people and the larger system. It's just done really well. And it's funny because this is a show that has way less plot than something like The Wire, which is really famous for having so much plot and being so, I think, easy to enjoy in that regard. But The Deuce is almost like anti-fan service, and it's so dedicated to serving those themes. And I think ultimately doing justice to its characters, at least the ones that get the best stories. That is really impressive. And I mean, it's only like 20, it's less than 30 episodes total. And it's never like a huge ratings hit. But I think the legacy of the show is just that this overall arc that it goes on. And season 3, I think is the strongest season just because you get a lot of great payoff that's been coming for so long that I found it incredibly satisfying. What about you?
Yeah, I thought season 3 was very satisfying. I thought it was a really fun watch. And I thought it was also interesting how they were able to like take this 5-year jump and be able to put some characters in the same spots and some characters very much far ahead from where they were, a major development in their own arc as characters. And like someone like Lori in this season, even though she's this famous porn star, very much kind of stuck within her own issues still and still trying to like make something of herself. um Frankie, another character who throughout the season very much just stuck being the same kind of character, whereas the ones who were able to, I think, be more internal, be more I don't know, retrospective or inflective of their own choices, their own life, where they want to go, what they actually want to accomplish, were the characters that you saw take steps, make something of themselves, be able to have a different future than the one that it seemed like they were kind of doomed to. So I thought that was something Simon did well. And obviously there's the typical Simon touches, where you have this big story with all these characters, and that can be a challenge for almost any other showrunner or director to manage, and he just juggles it and interweaves it so well. It's so impressive the way he builds worlds, the way he builds characters out. I mean, even someone I forgot his name. It's the guy who plays Lenny Bruce and Maisel.
Luke Kirby.
Yes, Luke Kirby. He gets maybe 3 scenes this season for his personal life, and it's mostly related to him and his wife's relationship and how he's a closeted gay. And I think it does so much with so little to build out that character, and just how much impact that had on him and his family. It's really impressive. So I think The Deuce might go down as one of the most probably underrated and shows of this era of TV, because like you said, it's never a ratings darling, but I think just a masterclass in terms of how you tell a story. So what moments from season 3 really stood out to you?
Well, I think overall, I think the best characters in season 3 would be Lori and Eileen slash Candy,
Mm,
probably, and they got they've gotten significant screen time throughout the whole show, and Lori in particular, obviously she's at the forefront of Cece in the first 2 seasons, and we obviously really enjoyed Gary Carr's performance, even if Cece was a really detestable person. Obviously, he was not in this season because he's already dead. But
mm,
seeing Lori continue to have, I think, really fulfilling arc, and even if it doesn't have a happy ending, um, it's just really well drawn. I think Emily Mead in particular,
yeah.
who I only known from her brief appearances on The Leftovers, really, really does a lot. And I think that's probably the character that Simon really, I think, did a lot of work to build up. It was obvious that Maggie Gyllenhaal was a producer on the show. She was never going to be Candy and do some nudity if the character was not going to have some grander, ambition. And sure enough, as she becomes a director and activist in a certain sense, that
Hmm.
becomes obvious. But Lori, I think, is probably like the best aspect of the show, just because that arc, I think, that could have gone sideways or could have been less special. So
Mm,
I was really impressed with that, and obviously, not great to watch her go out the way she did, but
yeah.
yeah, I think those are my two favorite arcs for sure.
Yeah, Lori's the real tragedy of the story. She's the one that kind of gets eaten alive by this world, whereas you see characters like Abby or Candy, like you talked about, um, be able to like make something of themselves. Um, how did you feel about Vince and Frankie? I
Mm.
think Franco, when he was first attached to this and gonna be playing twins, it was probably the most publicity that the show got heading
Yep.
into its premiere. And then I think it was pulled off to varying levels of effectiveness throughout.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was an unnecessary gimmick, especially considering Frankie Martino didn't change throughout most of the show. He's relatively one note as a person, and in a sense, his story ended the way it always would. I think that was done well. Maybe not the most unique character in a Simon show, a little familiar, but
Mm,
that was done well. But it didn't need to be Franco, right? And obviously,
right.
with the allegations of misconduct and the way Franco had carried himself at that was that acting school, the way he was
Yeah.
directing, the optics were not great. That Franco stayed on with the show, playing two different characters, and even directed an episode or two this season. I think Simon's a very progressive guy that really does, practice what he preaches and whatnot. And I think unforced error. At the same time, HBO said that nothing bad had happened on their experience with him on the Deuce. So kind of complicated considering nothing criminal ever happened to Franco. I think there's a civil suit now.
Hmm.
But yeah, in terms of the characters, I think I always liked Vince more. Um, and you think when you start watching the show that he's going to be like an A1 lead,
Right.
and he really just ends up fading into the stacked ensemble the way a lot of Simon ensembles go. So
Hmm.
yeah, in a sense, against the extra Franco-ness of it all, it might not have been worth it. But I mean, they were good performances, and it was pretty impressive towards the end the way they did the effects with them sharing scenes.
Yeah, for sure. I did feel like the scene where Frankie dies just fell very flat for me. I don't know if it was just that I didn't really care for Frankie much or what, but something about that scene just didn't hit me the way I kind of expected.
Yeah, it, it just felt as soon as Pasquale
Hmm.
came onto the show, you just felt like, all right, here's the guy that's going to kill Frankie.
Yep.
It felt a little obvious, felt a little self-serving to the story in terms of getting rid of him. And that's fine. I think it still works. But yeah, I think you're right. It's not the most warm. Feel that great seeing it happen, or feel that bad. I think having Mike come down with AIDS, though, that even though Mike is definitely a ancillary character, that definitely I think hit me a lot harder. And obviously all
Mm, yep.
the stuff with Paul. The specter of AIDS was really over the show since season 2. but really seeing the way that plays out in the show, and they don't really Simon never like defers to like grief porn or anything, right? It's more about like people using the opportunity to make up for lost time and missed connections, and reconnecting with the past. That's kind of a common theme this season. So yeah, I like that focus more. And Frankie, if Frankie had left the show a season ago, nothing probably would have changed, right?
No, I don't think so. Someone that I was really impressed with was Chris Coy, who played Paul on the show. I thought Paul, especially the episode where he calls Todd's parents in, and
Yep.
as Todd is at the end stages of dealing with HIV. I thought he was just incredibly strong in that episode, and the way that he played such a delicate moment in this story, and kind of portraying the effects that this disease had on this community, on the people during this time. I thought he just absolutely killed it. And also shout out to Chris Bauer, who played Bobby, and just like, fuck Bobby, man. Like, I hated that guy throughout. He's such a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I don't know, just a really like not great person. Although I did like how he handled getting what was his name out of jail? Out
Black
of
Frankie.
Yes, Black Frankie out of jail. Thought that was great.
Yeah, Black Frankie remained Black Frankie once White Frankie died. The old habits, I guess. But that was funny. Fits those guys though. How that would go.
Yeah.
His son Joey. I actually like that little detail of him growing up a little bit as the show progressed, then getting involved with Wall Street and bringing that in, little shades of Wolf of Wall Street antics, right? Also, didn't actually realize this. Joey's played by Gandolfini's son. Cool little cameo of sorts. How'd you feel
Did
about
not know that?
Yeah. I didn't know until I looked it up. How'd you feel about Frankie Longo and Rudy Pippolo, and how that the mob aspect of the show fizzled out? I like that like mob bar setting we got a few times. That was very classic. They all look like Italian ass mobsters. A little cliche, but that was funny. But how'd you feel about that? Like Rudy going out as the more ruthless, like Gotti mobsters are coming in. Definitely like a changing of the guard. That been building up for a while.
It really surprised me. I did when I saw him walking around the car, and the way that they were talking that scene. I thought for sure it was going to be the other way around in terms of who killed who. But I think it made sense the way it went down, and did embody like you said, the changing of the guard, so to speak. And it reminded me a bit of a lot of the deaths in The Wire. I know you haven't seen it, but a lot of times there would be people in cars, and it would be like a youngin from the crew that they're in, or the gang that they're in, who would be sneaking up on an elder in the crew, and just kind of establishing themselves as the new person in that spot. So I thought that was also kind of like a nice like nod to some of the Wire type stuff. I don't know. Overall, I think this show is just there's so much to like and so much to dig into, and it's around such a topic that you would just never, I think, expect to really see given this much time and this much detail. And that's really what Simon does best, man. Is he takes these stories that I think people either struggle to tell to the depth that he does, or don't touch, and he really brings them to life. And I'm actually gonna miss the Deuce a little bit. I had to do some catching up prior to recording today, but it was just a really great watch. I was riveted.
Yeah, man. It's again, really satisfying show. I'm really happy that we stuck with it, and I think everyone who did stuck with it was very satisfied and happy with the show. Everyone seems to evangelize for it that does watch it. But as we mentioned before, Simon will be back in short order. He's already filmed a Plot Against America miniseries based off the famous Philip Roth novel. It's already been shot, so we'll get that in the new year. So Simon will, of course, be back on HBO soon enough. But yeah, the Deuce, I'd rather leave too early than leave too late. So I think they Simon Pelicanos handled it really well. So really satisfying.